So the head, daunting to just about everybody who doesn't like the thought of a fish head. It is everything that you would imagine. It's, you know, the eyes, the blood, everything about it is not overly inspiring. But, you know, for me, we really wanted to challenge the most daunting part of the fish, and that was the eyeball. The eyeball was really the part of a fish that I just thought, well, if I'm going to win people over with something, we've got to start with the eye, because that seemed to be the biggest challenge. So to go in and draw your knife around the circumference of the eye and then lift it out, it's then just a matter of drawing the blade under and cutting this out. So there might not seem too much of a technique to it, but there is. You don't want to puncture the actual eye itself, because then it becomes a bit stringy and a bit difficult to work with. So this eye now out in one piece. Again, talking about the heart and other organs and things that you can't maybe use straight away, these freeze very well. So if you are attempting to make the eye chip that's in the whole fish cookbook, almost harvest the eyes and freeze, and then when you've accumulated enough, then give it a crack and see how you go. I've seen eyes used as a thickener to sauces, to blend them and then add a spoonful of to a sauce to enrich and thicken. To me, that seems quite aggressive in terms of a level of seasoning, a level of complexity that I feel is quite confrontational to a lot of people. Even the mouthfeel of it is quite challenging. By no means, you know, would I ever, you know, want to eat an eyeball like as it is, roasted as a whole fish and then grab it out. Uncles have tortured me over the years at Christmas time, chasing me around to eat a fish eye, but it's definitely not something that I feel a lot of people in the West really appreciate and love. So how do I get the average Joe wanting to eat a fish eye? So we blended it, we mixed it with tapioca flour, and we made almost like a really thick paste. And we spread that out on a mat, and then we dried it out in a low temperature oven overnight. And so you get like a hard chip, basically, a very crunchy, you know, hard chip that if you ate it, it wouldn't be pleasant at all. But then to deep fry it in really hot fat at 190 degrees Celsius, it puffs like a pork cracker, like a prawn cracker. Like you get all these tiny bubbles all over the outside. The very small piece of eye chip that you have almost triples in size, and then it becomes a vehicle for a, you know, wonderful list of things, whether it's a tara masalata that you make from the roe of the fish, or whether it's the actual fish itself chopped up into a tartare and then spooned into the actual cracker. It was a great way to add some texture and bring some intrigue into a part of the fish that obviously I don't feel many would want to pick up and just try. So the eye comes out. Like we discussed with the collar, the opportunity to just roast this fish head whole is wonderful, and to share a fish head with friends might not seem like, you know, the best Sunday lunch you've ever had, but to really think about some interesting seasonings that you may have had on roast pork shoulders, braised lamb shoulders, even like caramelized palm sugar and, you know, just beautiful Thai ingredients, almost fish sauce and palm sugar and coconut milk and things like that. To do a curry even with a head like this would be an exceptional way of trying to eat this fish head, just because there's so much meat that sits within all the nooks and crannies. So to break this fish down and take little sections of meat out really isn't doing the fish complete justice, but again, it kind of gives some people that are a little bit queasy about eating a whole fish the opportunity to try some of this flesh that sits within. All right, so the head, what we're going to do is we're going to separate out a couple of muscles from around the cheek area, and just so that we can give you an understanding of how the head's actually made up. A lot of times, you know, this head's fantastic to eat as a whole piece or a split half, but to avoid any kind of bone intrusion when you're wanting to eat it and just enjoy the meat for what it is, this is a really good way of breaking it down. So start with the knife just in behind the eye, and I'm angling the blade towards the eye so that we can get as much meat out as we can. We make the first cut in behind the eye so that we've got access to put our finger beneath the flesh, and then we draw the blade following the bone. The bone will suggest where the knife goes. So like any good meat butchery, staying close to the bone is imperative to maximize the amount of actual flesh that comes away. So stay close to the bone And now it's just a matter of almost scraping it away and using the stencil that you've created with your knife and just following where you've already been. Out that comes. So that is, you know, what we know as the cheek, but actually is the jowl. So the jowl of a fish is, you know, what sits on the outside. Within this fish head is an actual cheek, and I'll cut that out so you can have a look. But as you would see it on a pig, where, you know, the face, the meat on the outside of an actual pork face region is the meat that's on the cheek here, that also runs down the neck, and that's referred to as the jowl. And what you can do with the jowl is you can produce guanciale, which obviously is so, you know, significant in carbonara. So if we know that we're cutting a jowl from a fish, then all of a sudden we've got the opportunity to produce fish guanciale, which is so exciting, especially when you start talking about other significant fish species like yellowfin tuna or you know, big cods and things like that, where the muscles get so much bigger, and you're looking not at something that's small like this, but like a dinner plate kind of size. That's a huge opportunity within the charcuterie world to explore fish hams and fish guanciale. So the jowl comes out, and so the next cut, to get to that cheek part, we need to first deal with what sits under the fish head, which is the throat. Also, like in Basque culture, they call cocoches, and cocoches are usually cut from hake, nearly exclusively cut from hake, and not really taken from many other fish, which is surprising. Like when we talk about bataga, a lot of the times bataga is something that is taken from mullet, and it shouldn't just be mullet that we're considering. I mean, this fish here has some roe in it, which maybe we would consider to process and salt. As well, this fish has got a beautiful throat that would be just as delicious as hake. So basically, we're making a cut. We're cutting this membrane away from the bottom jaw with the intent to separate this whole piece out. So we make sure that it's completely cut. And this part here we can finish with the knife and cut around like that. So this part here is the throat, and then in behind the throat is the tongue, which, you know, is quite fascinating because you don't often see a fish tongue. To get this throat off, I put the blade in behind next to the tongue, just in behind here. And it's sitting on a hard piece of cartilage, so your knife can't really go anywhere else, and it's a matter of going out like that and clearing this membrane away, and then going down behind the tongue like so, and then finishing out this way towards me and cutting that out. So that there is fish throat, which again, everybody might be a little bit squeamish, but it's absolutely delicious. It's so gelatinous. When you cook it, I cook it in verjuice because I just find verjuice has got a great acidity to it. It's a little bit sweet when it reduces down. And what happens is you cover this throat in verjuice and you let it cook with a lid on until it's really, really soft and tender. Remove the lid and evaporate off the verjuice a little bit further, and what happens is it almost makes like a beautiful pill, like a really sticky, sweet kind of sauce that coats the outside of the throat. And I mean, personally, I wouldn't even be as fancy, like I wouldn't be fancy with it at all. Just put it on a really beautiful piece of sourdough that's been grilled with olive oil and put some salt on it, and throats on toast is heaven. And I mean, the only extra thing that you would do to it would be maybe to put some salsa verde, like some green sauce on top with mustard. And it's one of the real joys that come out of a fish. So, I mean, again, that's a really significant piece of flesh coming off a fish. And you can come back to the scales and you can have a look that it weighs 60 grams. So 60 grams, I mean, that's a lot. That's an entree portion at a restaurant. You look now at this tongue and the surrounding frills, and I mean all these frills, like I mentioned before, talking about the fins and things going into a really highly gelatinous stock, these are perfect. Like they've got so much gelatine in between and all this membrane that starts breaking down will just add a huge amount of richness to stocks. So again, not to be thrown away. So we cut this off and what we end up with is this tongue. And you've got these two pieces here. Now, if we had the time, we'd go along and we'd really scrape this back so that you can really polish this actual bone here. And you can almost see it doesn't take a great deal of effort. So you can see you've got this wonderful bone here that the same can be achieved on this side. You bring these two bones together, and then using kitchen twine, you tie the two bones together so that you create a handle. You cook this tongue in a very similar way that you would do the throats, where you cook it in verjuice, so it becomes very sticky and gelatinous. Once that's done, chill it down, and then flour, egg wash, breadcrumbs the actual tongue itself, and then deep fry it, and then it's like heaven. It's a delicious morsel. Like, it's insignificant at the best of times, and not all fish are going to have a tongue of this size, but to experience the dark flesh that is this fish tongue and the stickiness and the gelatinous quality that it has is just really interesting, and it's a great little detail to not throw in the bin, and a great canapé option. I mean, if you're a fish restaurant or a fish business and you're processing so many fish every day, you would know that you would have a lot of these getting tossed in the trash every day. So a really nice part of the fish. Now, in behind here, you've got the palate of the fish, the top, the roof of the mouth, and to cut this away will give us the chance to see where this cheek is that I was talking about. So in here sits the cheek. So basically we carve out this little nugget, hidden nugget of flesh, like so. And there's a little piece of hard cartilage which sits on the bottom. And I'll just put my knife there and cut underneath. And that there is our little cheek. And this is an individual muscle that gets cut out of this socket right here underneath. So that's the eye there in behind, and the cheek, which is sitting exactly behind the actual jowl itself. So you can see the dark flesh here marries up to the dark flesh that's on the back of that there, and that's where the cheek sits. So you've got the jowl and the cheek. And again, on a bigger fish, you would end up seeing something far bigger than this, but it's just wonderful to know as a chef who's trying to create recipes and things that a fish has certain cuts, and then if you know that a cut exists, then you can generate a recipe based on what you know and what your knowledge is with meat, and apply that into the fish world. And that's why I keep referring about the opportunities that fish have that we've never looked at before, which are very much in line with meat cookery. Because like I said, there's an endless repertoire of meat dishes that are out there, but very few fish. A lot of times you'll look at a fish recipe and they are very much a fish on a garnish with a sauce. And if they're not bouillabaisse, or they're not paella, or they're not a significant global staple fish dish, then oftentimes they're a piece of fish on a vegetable with a sauce. And it's exciting to think that we can expand upon that repertoire with some of these new cuts. With regards to this remaining head, to show that, you know, these jowls and cheeks can come out quite easily, and you can see that on the sides, and you've got the opportunity to work with the eye, again, like this one here. At the end of the day, this head, to me personally, would be, you know, really enjoyed if it was flattened out completely, and you can do that by, I suppose, cracking down on that. And you know, you can take the bone, you can take this spine piece out of the middle here, and then that allows for a very flat surface on top. So as you would butterfly a fish, traditionally, where you lay out the fish fillet and then remove the spine from the middle, the same goes for the head. If you take out the bone underneath, you end up with a very flat surface. And if you think about those jowls still being in place, you rub the head with olive oil, you put a spice mix on, and then you go to the grill and you cook that on the char grill on that side, and then turn it over to this side to finish the cooking. What's happening is you're cooking all these wonderful succulent juicy pieces of fish flesh almost encapsulated within bone, which is wonderful because you're not doing damage to the immediate flesh. if you've got skin to protect flesh, or if you've got bone to protect flesh, the better, like the more delicious, the better texture the actual fish will have. So always critical to make sure you try to cook on the bone and you try to cook with the fish skin on. You'll benefit so much more from the flavor, and you'll probably realize the true flavor of the fish that you're handling, whether it's a wild salmon or whether it's this mulloway or whether it's a beautiful snapper. A lot of these fish come with the sense of, well, it's fish, and if it's not tuna and it's not a blue type of fish, it's a white fish, and if it's not that, it's a pink fish. Each fish is unique. Even if it is a white flesh fish, it has a flavor, there's an identity there. It's just about trying to maximize the method of cookery, trying to find out which method is going to give us the best possible flavor. So otherwise, make a beautiful fish stock. It seems like the most obvious way, but there's so much within this head that will benefit in terms of a soup or a stock, because you've got all this gelatin that lies within the lips, the eyes for thickening qualities. A lot of people say cut the eyes out of a fish head before adding it into a stock. Personally, I like making foggy fish stocks because they carry a depth of flavor and a viscosity that a clear broth just doesn't have. Obviously, for some recipes that are consommes and clear soups, you would want to make it without the eyes so that you don't get the cloudiness. But for a really nice, viscous, thick fish stock or sauce, or even in our case, we make roasted fish stocks, you're able to make fish gravies, which is really exciting because they are very similar to meat stocks in a lot of ways. So don't waste the head. There's plenty of opportunity there. Apply a bit of thinking. The other way you can do it is steam the whole head. Pick the flesh off as you would pick crab meat, and then you can actually make terrines. You can do terrines, you can do rillettes, you can do all sorts of different charcuterie methods by using the head meat itself. So lots of opportunity.